Hey guys, welcome to the Winkl Podcast, a podcast about all things influencer marketing and the creator economy. I'm Rahul, co-founder and CEO at Winkl, and I'll be your host for the show. Today we have Shuchi. She's a content strategist at Winkl, and basically helps create the content that goes out via the influencers for the clients and the brands we work with. And on today's show, we'll spend a lot of time talking about why content is important from the context of influencer marketing, right? So Shuchi, before we jump right in, please sort of introduce yourself to the listeners, and then we can sort of get into the questions.
Sure. So, hi guys, I'm Shuchi, and I spend my days watching and creating a lot of content for brands, content strategy in particular for brands, right? A lot of times brands come to us and say that, hey, I want a 12-month strategy, 6-month strategy. And I just sit there and come up with strategies. So, I hope you
Awesome.
find this
That's
interesting.
a very mysterious introduction, Chuchi. But anyway, sort of we'll get to reveal more throughout this conversation. So let's jump right in, right? We hear a lot of CMOs, marketeers, brand managers go up on stage at various panels, talk shows, social media, and talk about why content is king, right? But when you sort of check out their own brand's Instagram page or YouTube handle or whatever, there is a clear mismatch between what they say on stage and what actually ends up going out, right? And the reason I'm saying that is because a lot of the content out there is nothing but an ad. So even with influencer marketing, even with digital marketing, so on and so forth, there are very few brands that actually understand content well, right? And we've had the opportunity to work with hundreds of brands, right? And we've firsthand seen as to when the brand gives us freedom to explore, right, and to sort of do content in quotes, the campaign performs so much better than when it's just an ad, right? So let's get into the point that why do you think content is important, and first of all, what do you think is content? And let's sort of stick to this question within the context of influencer marketing.
Right. So the sad thing is, while influencer marketing has been booming for the past year, right? Things shifted once the pandemic came and everything shifted online. Right now, while that shift happened, a lot of people, instead of going like, hey, this is a new form of marketing and I should really, understand its nuances, people went like, hey, मैं टीवी पे ad दिखाता था, अब मैं लोगों के phone में दिखाऊंगा,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And when that happened, they people didn't realize कि लोग टीवी पे ad इसलिए देखते हैं because they want to see the show that's coming after it and they have no choice. But
yeah,
here, if you give people a choice between watching an ad or watching something else, they will choose not to watch the ad. No one wants to watch an ad,
yeah,
right? Like if you see, even Google talks about how most people have an ad blocker on their laptops, on
yeah,
their phones. Why? Because no one likes ad. No one responds well to it, right? So
yeah.
now influencer content, it's it's the human touch, right? You
Mhm.
have someone coming up to you and saying that, hey, I tried this product out and it really works for me. Why don't you give it a try? That is basically what influencer marketing is. But
Yeah,
people forget that. People go like, hey, I have to create content for my brand. Movie banate hain, ad banate hain.
yeah. So one question here, right? So, you let's take a specific case of, what you just mentioned is nothing but a review, right? Where, a content creator or an influencer is actually giving an authentic review about a product service they might have used. Right now, there's many ways to game it, right? People, brands will write up a script and ask the influencer or the creator to sort of say it out, right? So how does it, then become the same, right? Because how does the audience know it's an ad or a script versus something being authentic? What do you think makes that difference?
Right. So first of all, people forget to count the audience in when they're creating content. They forget to close the loop, right? They just
Mm-hmm.
think influencer will go talk about my product and everyone will be like, wow, this is not paid at all. This is
Yeah,
organic. And the influencer is just standing there with a shampoo bottle, just going like, yeah, this made my hair luxurious, shiny, and 15 other USPs.
yeah, yeah,
Everyone knows that it is paid content. Everyone
yeah,
knows कि script से बोल रहे हैं because first of all, influencers are not actors. वो
yeah,
convince नहीं करते अच्छे से. as much
Hmm.
as they think they are. But
Hmm.
if an influencer is coming and telling you कि hey, झाड़ू जैसे बाल है मेरे, मैंने
Hmm.
ये शैम्पू यूज किया, मेरी
Hmm.
लाइफ चेंज हो गई, यूज करो,
Hmm.
that makes a difference, right?
Got it. So what you're essentially saying is the audience is smart, point number one, and they figure out when something is scripted and something is not, right? And I think, I want to add a point here where I feel a lot of brands and, anyone working with creator or an influencer should give that freedom, to create, right? They
Yeah.
should obviously have a few guidelines here and there to sort of guide the overall thing. But I think the core, the meat of the matter should be left to the creator, because number one, they understand the audience really, really well. They probably know their audience better than you, who probably have 10, 15, 20 years experience, and they've been just creating for past 2, 3, 4 years, right? But the point is they understand the audiences really, really well. Second point to add is the fact that it's not just about understanding the audience, it's about the tone of voice that's unique to every creator. And the
Yeah.
moment you script it, that's lost, right? And I think that makes it very apparent कि ये script है, and influencer bus, is just saying that on in front of the camera.
I mean, at the end of the day, you need to keep the personality of the influencer in mind, right? You can't make them lose that,
Hmm.
right? If both of us were to advertise something or even talk about it as influencers, we would both do it in really different ways, right?
Yeah,
And people,
yeah,
brands, because they're like, I want to work with 15 influencers, and we don't have the time to personalize it to each influencer. We'll just give them one script and
yeah,
we'll, tell them ki aap bol do. Right. And it's sad. Like I love it when brands go like, hey, I will work with a few creators at
yeah.
a time, make
Hmm.
sure that their personality shines through. And you can see the difference. You can see when a brand is doing some really great collaboration, even though it's paid, I will still watch it. I will
Yeah,
still go
yeah,
ahead and be like, I should give this a try.
yeah.
Right. Take the example of Amrutam, right?
Hmm.
They work with a few creators,
Hmm.
but they make sure that each video is slightly different, right? Now very recently they worked with Diksha Rawat,
Hmm.
right? Diksha is known for her artsy style videos, great music, things like that, and she's done that in the
Yeah,
video itself,
yeah.
right? And even though I know it's an ad, I would still watch. I know it's a influencer paid content,
Hmm.
but I would still watch it.
And another, so I want to bring out another point, right? So while you said that working with few creators is great, at Winkl we've also worked with brands where they've activated 300, 500,000 influencers at a time. And that kind of campaigns work for brands which are okay to sort of give freedom, to creators, right? There are say 2, 3, 4 talking points at max, and
Yeah.
then the freedom is given to the creator to sort of post about it in their own way, in their own style, right? And that also works great because here, the brand, many brands often get cold feet when we say that, hey, let's leave it to the creator to figure it out, right?
Yeah.
But the reality is that influencer or the creator has built an audience of, thousands and lakhs of people over a period of time. They must be doing something right, right? And you need to sort of trust that creator with the content, with sort of putting it forth in front of an audience in a very convincing and an authentic manner, right? And the moment brands start controlling, the moment they say ki, I want to review every video, I want to review every script, then essentially, at that is a point when things go downhill. That is
Yeah.
a point when, from spending money to driving ROI, it's as good as burning money, right? So anyway, the point being that even if a brand is activating hundreds of creators, as long as freedom is given to the creators to sort of create their own content in their own unique style with, say 2, 3, 4 guidelines from the brand side, I think that does the job in a great way as well.
Yeah, and the great part is, like you mentioned, we work with 300 influencers at a time at Winkle, right? In
Yeah,
one campaign.
yeah,
So the
yeah,
way we create briefs is actually by just giving a direction to the influencer saying, hey, here's the website, here's the product, here are the, you know, points that you must keep in mind. But at the same time, this is a direction you can go in. Maybe this is something that can suit your personality. But a lot of times influencers come back to us saying, hey, I want to incorporate it this way.
hmm,
And
hmm,
here is how I think it'll work better.
yeah,
And we say, hey, you know what, go ahead. As
yeah,
long as you're keeping the brand's voice in mind and you're not saying, or even telling people that there are features that don't exist in the brand, go ahead, do it.
Yeah. So that brings me to the question, right? So now we spoke about, difference between an ad versus great influencer content. So let's try and reverse engineer a great piece of content. What are the nuances? What do you think goes behind a great piece of content created by a creator or an influencer? Like if we have to list down, say, 3, 4 bullet points, what would they be?
I think number one is personality. Like the
Mm-hmm.
way you talk normally, talk to your audience like that.
Right.
Right? Don't try to be someone you're not,
Hmm.
or don't try to make the influencer someone they are not. Right? That's key. Second is, while you are pitching your product, we forget कि 60 सेकंड में ऑडियंस आपके 15 यूएसपी नहीं याद रखेंगे,
Yeah.
राइट? आप तीन चूज करो, three most relevant USPs that a normal person will use or even remember, right? It's the art of stickiness. What
Yeah.
makes idea stick, right? It's the simple things that they can imagine themselves. Like if someone comes and tells you that, hey, this will moisturize your hair, remove dandruff, and um, some one other feature, you are more likely to remember that than going and learning some new chemical terms
Yeah.
and trying to figure that out. I won't remember that content piece as long as
Exactly.
it's simple.
A mistake a lot of brands make is, and we have seen this firsthand, right, where they will try and insert as many technical terms as possible, right, and the poor influencer is forced to sort of parrot it out, right,
Yeah.
and those are the campaigns we clearly know that this is not going to work, right, and typically what tends to happen is most large brands, that obviously we will not take names here, but most large brands are very rigid when it comes to sort of experimenting or giving that freedom. Why do you think that is so, Shuchi? I mean, before we sort of come back to point number 2, let's sort of deviate here and come back.
I think it's because, they're used to a certain way, right? They're used to creating ads. If you
Hmm.
take big traditional brands, they're
Hmm.
used to creating ads where they have an actor who's, exactly showcasing the product in a, specific
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
Right now, for them to switch to influencer marketing, like I mentioned, right? Their logic was TV में दिखाते थे, अभी phone में दिखाएंगे,
Hmm.
same रखेंगे, right? And they're
Hmm.
just like सस्ते influencers are cheaper. Let's create 15 ads, right? And
Yeah.
that is the logic that's coming in, instead of
Yeah.
going like, hey, this is a different form of marketing. This needs
Exactly.
more nuance, right? A
Yeah.
lot of times when we tell brands that, hey, I think you need help with content strategy, they get
Hmm.
scared and they just go like, अरे यार मेरे से पैसे निकालना की try कर रहे हैं. That's not true.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, so coming to point number 2, right? First one you mentioned is a personality, right? What's the second, and so
Keep
on?
it simple.
Okay.
Keep it simple. Add in USPs that people will remember.
Mm-hmm.
Right? 60 seconds है आपके पास. लोग इतने सारे content pieces देखते हैं. When you scroll through Instagram, you have some, like in one scroll you'll have 5 brands
Yeah. Yeah.
that are pitching you something.
Yeah.
What is the content you will remember? Content that
Hmm.
you can imagine, number one. Like
Hmm.
anytime there is content that is coming in, and it should be thumb stopping,
Hmm.
where सिंपल होना चाहिए, कॉम्प्लिकेट नहीं करो.
Hmm.
And I'll be like, ये अच्छा है. Like when I'm looking for a product, I will
Hmm.
think of you.
Hmm. Can
It's
you
just
give me an
keep it simple.
example of Can you give me an example of a recent content piece that was thumb stopping for you?
Um, it's gonna take some time.
Take your time, think of it. We'll come back to this. And what's the next? And okay, before you sort of move on to the next, I also have a view here, right? Now, one thing to sort of really take care when it comes to influencer content is, I think the best thing a brand can do is ask the influencer itself for suggestions, right? Because they know how to create content that engages their audience, right? And when you do a brand integration or a sponsor integration well, the audience remembers it because the integration itself is done in a very unique or in a very integrated fashion. It's not suddenly, you don't begin the video with showing the product,
Yeah,
right?
I agree.
So I think that is also very important. In fact, brands should not think of influencers and creators as simply ad inventory. They need to think of them as collaborators, right? Because here unlike ad inventory, where it's just say on TV a few minutes or on Facebook, Google, some visual space, with influencer content, it's much deeper, right? Because influencer is the one who is sort of translating your brand's message to
Mm-hmm.
their audience. So they play a very key role, right? And you need to treat the influencer and a creator as someone you collaborate with versus someone you're just transacting. And there's a difference between collaboration and a transaction, right? I think that difference needs to become very, very clear. And I think brands and brand managers and marketers need to sort of be prepared, saying that, hey, I'm going to collaborate with XYZ number of influencers versus I'm going to pay and they're going to give me something in return, right? While there is a transaction for sure, at the end of the day, the moment it's viewed as a collaboration, it tends to be a lot more fruitful, right? Versus a transaction where I'm paying you money and you post whatever I'm asking you to post,
Yeah, I
right?
agree. I completely agree. And also, when you think of them as collaborators, the content quality changes, right?
Mm-hmm.
The quality goes one notch higher because, at the end of the day, you're working together to put it across. And also, it becomes a unique piece of content,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you'd ask me, what is one good content piece I've watched?
Yeah,
That was thumb stopping.
yeah.
So there's this influencer called the Rebel Kid, Apurva,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? So she recently worked with a brand. I don't remember which,
Mm.
but it was a credit card for teenagers,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And the whole content piece was around how she is calling her dad and trying to evade what she's buying, but she needs the
Mm.
OTP from him.
Mm.
And I watched the whole thing because I related to it, because I was
Yeah,
just like, oh no, I was in that position,
yeah, yeah.
right? And then when the product placement actually came in, I was just like, this makes so much more sense.
Exactly. Awesome. Coming back, first point you mentioned was personality. Making sure that the influencer's personality comes out through that content, right? Second is keeping it simple. So, what's anything else to add to that?
No, I think those are the two main things: keep it simple and use the personality of the influencer well.
Hmm. So, I would like to add a point here, right? I think the third point that I have seen that sort of works in the favor of a brand and collaborating with influencers is the fact that and so it's a very simple and a very um, a tactical kind of a point, but I think it's very important. Do not script anything, right? As a brand, I think you should not script anything at all. You should talk about do's, don'ts, some guidelines here and there, but you should let the influencer sort of come with the script, the storyline, the mood board, so on and so forth. The moment that happens, and while you can sort of get it approved, just to check for the smaller things, the moment you let an influencer script it, I think that will sort of combine the first 2 points, right? Because they will sort of make sure their personality comes through, right? And second, influencers know what works. They know the moment you talk about 10, 15 technical terms in a video, the audience will zone out and scroll past it. And that
Yeah.
is when they will try and keep it simple, right? So I think a simple tactical advice here is to sort of give a few guidelines and let the influencer come back to you with a theme, a concept, an idea, so on and so forth. And obviously, as a brand, you can suggest broad themes, but let the influencer create the core of that content versus you trying to sort of dictate every small thing.
Yeah, I suggest give them a lot of research material. Tell them as much as you can about the product. Give them videos to watch. How are
Hmm.
you imagining things? And then let them, take the lead. They will come up
Awesome.
with some awesome shit.
Awesome. So let's explore the other, side of this question, right? We sort of explored what makes great influencer content, great sponsored influencer content. Now let's explore the other side, right? What are the, few things that are, wrong, and be very specific. Yeah. What are the few things that brands do wrong when collaborating with creators and influencers?
I think, a lot of reiteration will come from our last conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But here, one of the biggest things that I've noticed is, as you mentioned, transaction bahut ho gaya hai,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're just like, I need influencer content created. This
Mm-hmm.
brand is doing something great. let's also do the same thing,
Hmm.
and maybe it'll work for us, right? And then they go like, hey, give me these five influencers, I'll
Hmm.
give them the script,
Hmm.
kar lenge,
Hmm.
right? And that's like digging your own grave,
Okay.
right? It's burning money. It's you saying that, hey, experiment करने के लिए किया,
Hmm.
which you will say later. You
Yeah.
will not say that straight up, but later
Yeah.
when it doesn't work, you're just like experiment tha. Let's do better next time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've also seen a lot of brands that insist ki, the brand logo should come on the content, and it should be visible throughout, right? I am not really sure about that because the moment you try and make something overtly, branded, right, where it looks like the moment you look at it, it looks that it's, heavily branded, brand ka logo hai, it's occupying, like 1/10 of the screen on the top right, right? I think for some reason people sort of zone out or tune out before they even get a chance to look at the first 5-10 seconds of the video, right? And I'll tell you the reason, right? Because fundamentally we humans do not like being sold to, right? um,
Yeah.
Probably there are, less than 5% of ads that you really enjoy watching,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the remaining 95%, कि कुछ बेच रहे हैं, I am going to switch to another channel, I'm going to scroll past it, right? Most ads get scrolled past, at least on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, right? YouTube, the first thing you're looking for when you play a video is a skip ad button, right?
Yeah.
Unless the video captures your attention the first 6 seconds or 5 to 6 seconds, you're not going
Mm-hmm.
to watch it. You're sort of mentally prepared to skip the ad, right? Very similarly on Instagram, after every 4 5 posts, there's going to be an ad, so you will be ready to scroll past it, right? So I think, um, you know the fundamental point being here that, the moment you try and make it heavily branded, I think you're not giving your content a chance to perform in front of the audience, right? While the audience may realize a video is branded, say 5, 10, 15 seconds in, right? The moment you start with the brand logo or saying that, hey, sponsored by Flipkart or Amazon or any of the XYZ brands out there, and then you get in, um, I think you're not giving your own, campaign a chance to stand in front of the audience.
But I mean, with the new ASCII guidelines,
Hmm.
I mean, people across other countries have been saying sponsored for a while now.
For
And
sure.
I've noticed some good content there, right? Like UK may, US may. They have to
Yeah.
put hashtag sponsored, hashtag
Yeah. Yeah.
paid collaboration, right?
So my point is not that, you should not disclose it. You need to disclose it. I
Yeah.
think the best creators disclose it. They have disclaimers. They use hashtags. They even before the product integration of the video, comes, right? They say, ki, this is going to be an ad, and this is how I'm going to pay my bills, right? Some of them put it in a very humorous way. That's great. What I'm saying is, when it comes to at least the visuals, the
Hmm.
brand should not force the creator to put things like a logo or, it should not, because the moment you put up a logo,
Hmm.
it goes more into the ad territory versus content, right? Because the point being, no matter how, no matter if it's being sponsored or not, it still has to be content. And the moment you start putting logos, like for example, the brand insists sometimes that the creators need to be dressed up in the brand's colors, right? Then it's like a TV ad, right? Because in TV
Yeah.
ads, the models are wearing the colors of the brand, right?
Yeah.
So I think a brand or a marketer or, anyone sort of collaborating with creators should consciously, take or be very aware that they're not going to the ad territory and sticking more on the content side, right? Because the more natural, the more organic, the more real it looks, right? The better. And keeping in mind that, the creators need to disclose that it's an ad, right? It's sponsored, but I think the content in itself should not, be like an ad.
I agree. Also, if brands are looking to, make sure all of their content is uniform, right? People
Hmm.
know that ये brand का content है.
Hmm.
Give the influencers a template. Like Sugar
Hmm.
does it quite a lot. Very
Hmm.
recently for their Women's Day campaign, they gave a template to each
Hmm.
of the influencers. And the thing is, even though it was a paid collaboration,
Hmm.
people knew कि sugar का है, they're using
Hmm.
this template, and that's okay. Like
Hmm.
आपको करना ही है uniform,
Hmm.
to use templates. Give all of your influencers templates. Future generally did the same thing.
Hmm. Awesome. Great. Now, sort of coming to the next question, right? Um, I feel a lot of brands at the end of the day, look over their shoulders, see what the other is doing, and then try to do the same thing with, what, um, their strategy, right?
Uh-huh.
Now, how do you avoid the temptation of looking at competitors? And, because at the end of the day now, except a few outlier brands in every category, most brands do similar campaigns, similar content. So it gets lost, right? There is nothing that stands out. And you know in today's day and age where as an individual I am exposed to probably a few hundred content pieces every day, right? Probably on my Instagram, every time I open, I probably there are at least 50 to 100 stories waiting to be seen. There are at least 100 to 200 feed posts, right?
Mm-hmm.
And across and multiple times a day across notifications, I open my laptop, TV, phone. So you're bombarded with a few hundred content pieces every day, right? How do you stand out? Because most brands, um, you know even a lot of D2C brands today, a lot of FMCG brands, a lot of startups, right? They look at competitors, what are they doing? And because of that FOMO, they try and do something similar, right? While it might be great, it might make you look good in front of your boss, saying that, hey, I also did what they did, right? It doesn't really achieve the true purpose because, for someone to remember you, you have to stand out in some sense, right? So how do you avoid the temptation of, looking at other people, other brands in the similar category and then trying to sort of, copy them or take inspiration in quotes? Or let me put the question another way, right? Um, what can you do to be unique and to stand out?
Okay, number one, you should look at your competitors' content so that you're
Mm-hmm,
not copying it. You shouldn't use it to copy, but you should look at it to make sure you're not copying them. And
mm-hmm,
second is remembering your brand voice, remembering what you want to position your brand as, right? You need to remember that at the end of the day, people have now started seeing brands as personalities, right? Her brand, like Zomato has a personality,
hmm.
right? You associate Zomato, Netflix with a sort of personality, that quirky, funny, sarcastic personality. So
Yeah.
give that personality to your brand and use influencer content to do the same, right? So आपको content create करना है. Like I've noticed this with a lot of, beauty brands, with a lot of, skincare brands.
Mm-hmm.
All doing the same things. I have seen, like, when I scroll, I see 5 people washing their face.
Hmm.
And I'm like, ठीक है, आप सब मुंह ही धो रहे हो, right?
Yeah.
What is different? What will I remember if I watch all of those 5 videos?
Yeah.
People are
Yeah.
washing their face,
Yeah.
right? You need to separate your brand and give it that unique voice. Yeah, so one of the best examples of brands having a personality is Boat.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of headphone brands out there, but what is a brand that you can associate a personality with? Boat, right? It's a brand that is associated with badasses,
Hmm.
right? By people who are, pushing hard and hustling in their own fields.
Yeah. Yeah.
Apple has its own personality, right? Apple
Hmm.
has the, quirky, sarcastic but sophisticated personality.
Yeah.
So give your brand that personality and your content will mirror it, right?
Hmm.
Make sure to remember that when you're, looking at an influencer, when you're looking at, just don't go like, huh, I want to do influencer marketing. Any influencer will do. Just give me females
Yeah.
and I will work
You
with
know,
them, whatever.
another interesting thing that I've sort of noticed is a lot of brands want to work with influencers and creators that are in their own verticals, right? For example, a beauty brand will want to work with beauty influencers, right? While that's great for hygiene content, right? And we'll get to Hero Hub hygiene in a bit. But while that's great for hygiene content, for it to really stand out, it's sort of very interesting for brand. If a beauty brand, for example, collaborates with someone from comedy or humor, right, or someone from the travel niche, right, there are a lot of interesting ways you can sort of integrate the brand well. But I feel a brand should also go out and explore creators, influencers in other categories, other niches, which are different from their own brand's niche, right? Because that will create a lot of interesting content for you to remember. Versus a beauty blogger talking about a makeup product is great, right? It's great for hygiene content, regular, something that you see every day. But I think for that big bang content that someone you want someone to remember, I think brands need to sort of go out and explore beyond their existing niches that sort of they belong to.
Yeah, but we have to give a word of caution here. A lot of times when people say this, they go out and find a random person who's not at all related, but they're like different hai,
Hmm.
and they work with them. Like thoda
Hmm.
connection hona chahiye, like it should match,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Like for example, speaking of, mixing verticals, we very
Hmm.
recently created a plan for a jewelry rental platform,
Hmm.
right? And here most people would go for, I mean, the obvious women trying jewelry, things like that. But we,
Yeah.
along with this, we actually suggested a finance expert.
Hmm.
He said that, hey, why doesn't she talk about why it's financially better to
Hmm.
rent jewelry rather than, and this is precious jewelry we're talking about,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, from a finance expert, it adds a lot of credibility,
Hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
it generates recall in a very different way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, like you rightly said, that I think more brands need to sort of become open to, experimenting. Not a lot of these collaborations will really end up working, right? There will be some that will bomb as well. But I think for you to really stand out, or rather, brands that have stood out and have really made mistakes in the past and have learned from them, right? Because if you want to avoid, or if you're optimizing to make mistakes zero, then in that case the scope of experimentation really dies down, and hence as a result you don't really stand out. You become just another brand, like tens or tens or hundreds out there, right? So I think yeah, with that word of caution, I think it's important for brands to be okay sometimes that, hey, in the process of me trying to figure out how do I stand out, it's okay to make mistakes, right? Or mistakes will rather end up happening, right? Um, and taking those mistakes in your stride, right? I mean, will help the brand eventually figure out what's working and what's not.
I agree. I completely agree.
Awesome. Now, sort of segueing into another important thing when it comes to content, right? A lot of brands, do one-off campaigns with influencers and sort of move on, right? It's like they're sort of trying to work with as many different influencers as possible. Now, while that's great when you're trying to reach out to a large audience and generate reach, right? I'm afraid that does not generate a good amount of recall, right? And we've typically seen that a long term strategy where you work with an influencer or a creator for at least 3 to 6 months, right, turns out to be, number one, a lot more cost effective because you're essentially doing a bulk deal over there. And second, um, collaborating with influencers for the long term sort of generates a high amount of recall within that influencer's audience, right? So it's like it's a classic question of, do you sort of go for, do you expand horizontally or vertically? And I feel before you go horizontal, I think brands need to really go vertical, collaborate deeply with a few influencers on a regular basis, and then at the same time explore with a wider set of new influencers for every campaign, right? What's your view on this?
I agree. See, let me put it in simple terms,
Hmm.
right? If one person comes and tells you, "Ki, hey, I tried this product, it's great," you'll be like, "ठीक है," right? Someday, if it comes up, then you might go like, "Hey, why don't I try this? Someone mentioned it." But if that same person came and told you 5 times, "Hey, I use this product. Hey, I really like this product," or
Hmm.
in whatever 5 different ways, you have to go like, if they're talking about it 5 times, there must be something good about this product,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
then you're more likely to go and purchase the product. It's as simple as that.
Hmm.
It's the same, use the same psychology that you would use for yourself, right? And brands forget
Awesome.
to do that. They just go like, hey, let me work with different influencers, मेरा reach ज़्यादा होगा, the amount of if I work with a new influencer every time, I'll get a new audience base,
Yeah.
right? But at the end of the day, you are not establishing recall or trust into that audience base's mind, right? You're just an option.
Hmm.
You've not become the only option yet.
Yeah. So that brings me to the question. Like you haven't really answered why long term is important, right? So would actually like you to go deeper into um, exactly why a long term strategy works much better than a one off.
Right. So any product or any service that you are doing influencer marketing for, there
Hmm.
are stages, right? There are stages of influencer marketing that you need to follow.
Hmm.
It's not going to be like one day you've done a collaboration and the next day you're going to get a lot of traffic into your website. That might happen, but at the end of the day, you need to, if let's take from scratch, if it's a brand that's starting from scratch, you need
Hmm.
to build awareness, right? People
Hmm.
don't know who you are,
Hmm.
right? So you need to build awareness, then comes in recall, right? You keep talking about the product, recall comes in, people say, hey, I know this brand. Third phase is where you need to build trust. People need
Okay.
to know, okay, I can blindly trust you,
Hmm.
right? And that takes time. Influencer marketing is a long game. You need to constantly keep creating content, right? And
Exactly.
also, it can't be the same kind of content. It can't
Hmm.
be like you're still stuck in the brand awareness phase and haven't moved into creating recall or using different mediums to remind people that you exist,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So you need to have some patience. You can't be like, my एक content piece में I will get this much ROI or I will
Yeah.
get this much, leads. नहीं होता
Yeah.
है.
Yeah. I mean, so coming to the question of ROI, right? So a content piece that generates awareness is very different from something that creates engagement. Is very different from something that generates traffic or installs or sales, right? So fundamentally, Shuchi, what do you think is the difference between say these three large buckets? What is the difference between something that generates reach, engagement, and final ROI or measurable actions such as website traffic or installs or sales?
Right. So in terms of brand awareness, it's
Mm-hmm.
almost like you're coming and saying, hey, I exist and this is my product, right? It's a no pressure situation.
Right.
It actually should be a no pressure situation, but most times it is not. Most times it is kharido, right?
Mm,
So
mm,
that awareness is the content that is created is very like, hey, this is something new I've discovered,
mm,
and if you think that you have the same problem as me, give it a try.
mm,
Right now, coming to engagement is where you really have to give people an incentive,
mm-hmm.
right? I've noticed that a lot of brands go like, hey, dance challenges are going great and I
Yeah.
want a lot of user generated content,
Mm,
right? So they just go like, you know what, I'll create music, I'll create dance steps, and I will just ask the influencers, nacho, and I will
yeah.
get so many user generated content videos in, and
Yeah.
people will just, like, people will die to work with me.
Yeah.
That's not how it works, right? You need to give people an incentive to do that dance,
Mm,
while, and also the music and the dance have to be catchy, I must say. Kuch bhi nahi chalega,
yeah.
right? But you need to give people an incentive, right? If I told you ki, theek hai Rahul, I am doing this step, you also do it,
Mm,
what incentive am I giving you? Why would you want to do it? If I told you
yeah.
I'll give you 5 lakhs
Mm.
if you do this step, you would be like,
And
theek hai,
and
let's do it.
the incentive, need not be only money, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of very interesting, very cheap ways of creating that incentive, right? Many, many times you can just use the influence of the creator itself to drive the incentive. For example, we recently did, campaign with a brand where we got the audience engaged and promised them that, hey, you get to spend half a day with the influencer, going shopping, right? And that worked great because people who really follow that influence and want to spend time, right, did actually end up participating, and that
Yeah.
generated a lot of UGC, and not just UGC, it generated a lot of engagement in general, right? And the influencer didn't even charge anything extra because they want the opportunity to sort of engage with their audience followers, right? Like you need to think from the influencer standpoint as well. So if you're able to create a win-win situation that drives engagement, I think you don't need to even spend any money at all on that, right? And I think that's a great way to build engagement. And as a result of engagement, and given that engagement is, the second or the third step in the funnel, you automatically generate awareness and reach, right? And that's the beautiful part about the word engagement. When someone engages with your brand in some way or the other, they will remember it, right? In fact, the best campaigns that are optimized to generate reach actually also end up generating a lot of engagement, right? Because fundamentally at the core of it, um, I think engagement is the proof of the pudding for most campaigns. What are the kind of comments the content is generating? What are the kind of while I would not give too much importance to likes, right? Because it's hard to really read into that. I think great comments from the audience on that piece of content, or great participation from the audience, really makes a difference, right? And the best content actually ends up generating engagement, and in the process reach and awareness as well, right? Now coming to the third bucket, Shuchi. Now, what do you think is something that generates ROI? How do you think a piece of content from an influencer can make you go purchase something or try out something or make you install an app or something like that? What is the difference between generating reach, awareness, engagement, and actually nudging the audience to take an action?
I mean, you basically need a strong call to action. But at the
Hmm.
same time, I've noticed that people are more likely to check out a product or go to your website if
Hmm.
you create enough intrigue,
Okay.
right? If you keep all your cards face open on the table and say, hey, I'm giving you all these features, swipe up.
Hmm. Hmm.
I've noticed people go like, huh, none of these features seem interesting to me. I don't want to swipe up. But if I
Hmm.
told you, hey, these are these two features that I think are interesting, but they have 18 more that
Hmm.
you might find interesting, just
Hmm.
swipe up.
Hmm.
People are more likely to go like, maybe I should just check it out.
Hmm.
Right. And a lot of times it's as simple as that. If you tell them a very complicated thing, ki, you know, itna sara CTA should be very simple. Swipe
Hmm.
up, just check it out. Don't push people into saying that, you will get this if you swipe up. You have to check it out now. No, just
Hmm.
I think you'll find it interesting. Just swipe up.
Hmm.
Right. And also you need to give them a good reason to swipe up. Like very recently, we did a collaboration where we used only stories,
Hmm.
right? And here, the pull in factor was we told them, ki, hey, you can go study in Prague for free.
Hmm.
All you have to do is fill up a form,
Hmm.
right? It was as simple as that. And we did
Yeah.
not even use posts, we just used stories to generate
Hmm.
leads.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that campaign generated a few 100,000 website visitors for actually cheaper than what it would cost from a Google ad, right? And yeah, so like you said, that I think uh, what I would want to add here is the fact that when a brand is trying to sort of generate ROI, they say that because okay, so it's very hard for people, brand managers and marketers, to sort of think in simple terms, right? Because ideally, if something is very simple, they think कि अच्छा मैंने क्या किया इसमें, I need to feel like I've contributed to this campaign, right? And that ends up complicating things a lot more. And the more complicated something is to the end user, end audience, the lesser effective it gets, right? While there may be exceptions here and there, but I think at a general level, um, you know like you said, right, it has to be something so simple that it like it should be something like that clicks immediately, मतलब immediately चमकना चाहिए. अगर नहीं चमका ना, तो people will scroll past it, right? Like you probably have 2-3 seconds to get your audience to realize something. If they don't, they will scroll past. So I think um, point number one is that. And I think to add to your point of creating intrigue, I think it's also about communicating or creating that FOMO, saying that, hey, um, you will miss out on something cool if you don't swipe up, or you will miss out on something cool if you don't click on that link, right? Now there are good and bad ways to do it, right? Obviously, you should not say things that aren't true to sort of create that FOMO. But I think with sort of keeping in the fences of what the truth is about a brand, their product, service, etc., I think it's very easy to create FOMO by just saying few things or saying the best things and not everything, right? And then let the audience discover for themselves what the brand is all about. Because the moment you sort of say everything out there, number one, it looks like an ad, right, all over again. And number two, uh, you sort of have all your cards open, and there's no intrigue, there's no FOMO. It's just plain and simple out there. So that doesn't work. You have to have a combination of keeping it very, very simple and at the same time creating that bit of FOMO to nudge the audience to take that action.
It's as simple as keeping in mind that if the audience figures out what your entire product is in that one video, they will
Hmm,
not want to check it out more.
hmm,
Right? अगर मुझे already पता है, I will make a judgment call right there उस video में ही.
hmm.
And I'll be like, हाँ नहीं पसंद मुझे, जाओ.
Awesome. So let's get into something technical, Shuchi. We do this with a lot of brands, right? So when we are sort of helping them with a strategy, a plan, we sort of break it down into hero, hub, and hygiene, right? Could you sort of help our listeners understand what this really means and how a brand sort of trying to create their own content strategy for influencer marketing look at it?
Right. So now the Hero Hub hygiene marketing model, it's very simple, right?
Mm-hmm,
Hero content is content that creates a bang.
mm-hmm,
Right? It's not going to drive engagement or ROI, but it's
mm-hmm,
content that will raise awareness, right? A
mm,
lot of times, hero content can be as simple as collaborating with a few macro influencers and telling them to just very interestingly bring about awareness for your product,
mm,
right? Now, next comes in the hub stage. Now, hub is content that'll generate a lot of recall, right?
mm-hmm,
It's ever ongoing content, right? Where
mm-hmm,
you're finding very interesting ways to
mm,
place your products in different places,
mm-hmm,
right? Is take for example the jewelry brand that I mentioned. Now,
mm,
hub here would come in where I would, pick a fashion influencer who's styling it. I would pick
mm,
a, what do you call that? A financial expert who
mm,
will talk about why renting jewelry is better than
mm,
buying it, right? And I
mm,
would also
mm,
bring in a bride to bring
mm,
in that emotional experience,
mm,
right? So now these are three different places where, in three different ways, I'm bringing about the product,
mm,
right? And last comes hygiene. Now, hygiene content is very important for any brand because
mm,
it builds a lot of credibility and trust, right?
mm,
If any product that is out there or any service that is out there, before trying it out, you will do your research on it, right?
mm.
Most times, it is as simple as us going on YouTube and typing the name of the brand or the name of the product. And the
Yeah.
videos that come up with that add to your hygiene content that is, really powered by SEO words,
Hmm.
right?
Awesome. Hmm. Interesting. Now that leads me to the question around sort of just understanding your process, right? Now, when a brand comes to you and says, "Okay, hey, I need a strategy for the next 6 months," right? I want to work with influencers. How do you sort of think through from start to finish through the entire plan? Like, how do you prepare for it? How do you actually create, those ideas, that strategy, that plan, and how do you finally present to the brand? Because this process would be very interesting sort of deep dive into, because I think it will help a lot of our listeners understand for their own brands and how they can go about creating the strategy, right? So it will be really interesting for us to sort of deep dive into your process of how you create a content strategy, a content plan.
Right. So now, first and foremost, not every brand needs Hero Hub hygiene,
Hmm.
right? You
Why
might be
not?
doing so. A lot of brands, if they already have content that is going out, then they need
Hmm.
to figure out what they need to do more of, right? Do you
Okay.
need more hero content? Do you need more hub content? Or do you need more hygiene content?
Hmm.
And the one that you're lacking in the most is what you should push first,
Hmm.
right? But if it's a brand that's new, that is a clean slate, then you would start off by really understanding, first of all, what their brand is trying to say and convey to people,
Hmm.
right? The easiest are hub and hygiene content, right?
Hmm.
Hygiene content is a must. You must have hygiene content out there before you actually start doing hub content, because at the end of the day, people are going to go and search for that content. So
Hmm.
start with hygiene. start with things that people will search for in your
Mm-hmm.
service, right? If you're
Okay.
a gym, people should know, number one, what are the services you provide, right?
Mm.
What are the different trainers that you have,
Yeah.
right? So all of that content should pop up, right? And
Mm.
also what this does, it gives you an opportunity to say, hey, this is a benchmark for branded content. This is
Mm.
what my brand should look like, right?
Mm.
So if you already have content out there by yourself that adds
Mm.
value to people, it will create a great perception in people's minds, right? I've
Mm.
noticed a lot of brands that are already existing. If you go and type their name on YouTube, you
Mm.
will not get great content, right? They're
Yeah.
just reposting ad content,
Yeah.
right? Where is your hygiene content? Where is the content that is building trust?
Mm.
It's important that you start creating that content, right?
Okay.
Second is hub content, right? Figuring out what are different places in which you can, place your product or service in,
Mm-hmm.
and which will actually make sense. It shouldn't be like, you know, एक प्रोडक्ट यहाँ का है दूसरा कोई आउटर स्पेस में ही है like the
Mm.
concept they should match, they should have
Mm.
a sort of combination, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like rented jewelry and financial expert.
Right.
So find those different areas and
Okay.
place your product in it. And third is hero content. Now this
Mm.
is the big bang. You can get very creative with this. You can,
Mm.
use emotion to get a lot of people to, come in. I once designed a hero strategy where we were going to get states to compete with each other,
Mm.
right? Where all the users would come in and just compete against each other with celebrities on their side
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
have a scoreboard. So you can go wild with hero content
Mm.
as long as your awareness is raised. It can be awareness for your brand, for your product. But this is the content which people should be like, I remember that content piece. It was interesting.
Mm. Interesting. So now that gets me to ask you a question, right? Now, when you sort of decide whether a brand needs to have this hero hub hygiene or just focus on say parts of that, right? Now, how do you go deeper? Now, how do you figure out ki I need to do this specific content idea versus not the other? Because you might have 20 ideas, right? How do you filter down to say four, five that you think should be done? Because it's while tempting to sort of try out as many different ideas as possible to execute all of them. It's a really hard thing to do, right? So how do you narrow your focus, say from 20 ideas that you get to say the two, three, four, five ideas that we actually sort of get executed?
I think it's the ones that have the strongest amount of pull, right? As an audience,
Mm-hmm.
what would you watch? What is content that would make sense to you?
Mm.
That is the filter that comes in first, right?
Okay.
Second is what are niches that we're not touching yet? What is
Mm.
something that is already there and
Mm.
we find loopholes in that, right?
Right.
Where can I add in content,
Mm.
right? And at the end of the day, you really have to understand what your brand needs. If I first and foremost just figuring out what content already exists, right?
Mm.
Hygiene content नहीं है तो वो create करो पहले. Priority क्या है, right? Your
Mm.
priority can't be कि I will create hub content, I constantly keep creating it, but I won't
Yeah.
focus on hygiene.
Yeah. Okay. Now, when you said try and figure out what needs to be sort of worked on for your brand, now there are different platforms that work well for different kinds of content, right? For example, hygiene content, YouTube is a great place because YouTube is driven by search, right? People show up on YouTube to search something similar to Google, right? YouTube is almost like a video search engine, so it's great for hygiene content, for example, right? So for different kind of um, content themes or content ideas, how do you pick the platform, right? How do you know, is it Instagram, is it Twitter, is it Facebook, YouTube, right? So how do you map a platform, and or how do you marry a platform and a content idea together, saying that hey, this content idea will work the best on this specific platform? How does that thinking happen?
So now here it depends on what the idea is, right? If the
Mm-hmm.
idea is as simple as incorporating the product in an influencer's life,
Mm-hmm.
YouTube works better. An integrated YouTube video where they're showcasing the life anyways will
Mm-hmm.
work better, right? But if it's something really atrangi like a dance challenge,
Mm-hmm.
and that it has to be shared, the reach has to be insane,
Mm-hmm.
that is where Instagram comes in, right? we mainly work on Instagram and YouTube for now,
Hmm. Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So the way both of these platforms have their own advantages and disadvantages, right?
Hmm.
Instagram is great for brand awareness and a lot of
Hmm.
times for brand recall also,
Hmm.
right? So any content idea that's coming in, can I convey it in 60 seconds and will it be interesting?
Hmm.
Right? Will it be something that people will want to share with their friends? Will it be something that people will want to interact with? That is the
Hmm.
number one reason why Instagram is chosen. Now,
Right.
YouTube may, a lot of times, if there is a need for someone to explain the product or use it in detail and show,
Mm-hmm.
that is exactly where we would place a YouTube video. Because you have the time to show someone कि हाँ मेरे 5 मिनट वीडियो 1 मिनट में मैं आपको दिखाऊंगी why
Hmm.
this product should be used,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right? And click through ratio is also much better on YouTube, right? Because you get more time and the intent is also higher for user.
Hmm. Yeah, because what I have personally seen here, right, is the fact that when it's, or rather, YouTube has more high intent audience versus Instagram because they're taking out a certain time to come watch the YouTube video, right? Whereas on Instagram, it shows up on the feed as you scroll, right? So YouTube, like my earlier point, is more search driven. So anything that, ideally, um, YouTube has better results when you're looking to drive an action like, say, an install or a sale, or whatever. Whereas Instagram works really great when it comes to sort of engagement or reach or awareness kind of stuff, right? Now, while sometimes Instagram works great for sale and YouTube works great for engagement also, but I think at a broad general level, I think you can sort of fit into these two buckets, saying that hey, reach and awareness, maybe engagement works great on Instagram, and I think um, action taking results like say installs, traffic, sales works great on YouTube as a platform, right? But again, I think for a lot of brands out there, exploring Twitter, LinkedIn also becomes very important because their kind of influencers might exist on LinkedIn, right? Where, for example, say, a lot of B2B companies or companies selling to professionals, right? I think leveraging LinkedIn as a platform could become very, very interesting. Right? So I think LinkedIn as an influencer network is sort of evolving as we speak. It's not as evolved, say, like Instagram or YouTube, but I think it'll be very interesting to sort of explore how LinkedIn can sort of drive that performance or that ROI to a brand because now we see lots of LinkedIn influencers, thousands of followers, right? Sort of cropping up every other day, right? So I think it's time that brands start looking at LinkedIn as a platform as well. Awesome. So I think we'll sort of try and conclude now because I think it's been quite some time. So I think, so sort of concluding, Shuchi, now you've seen the good, the bad, the ugly, right, of content, of influencer content. um, what do you wish for, say, in 2021, right? Or what do you wish brands did more of in 2021 versus, 2019 or 2020? Because the last 2 years were very instrumental for influencer marketing, right? Especially the pandemic really accelerated a lot of, the shift that we've seen in influencer marketing and the creator economy in general, right? So now, having been through that acceleration and probably we're still in the middle of it, what do you see more, or what more of do you want to see of something, and what is something that you want to see a lot less of?
I want to see a lot less ad content.
Mm-hmm.
Just please don't sell me on my phone. Just it's as simple as that. Don't sell me on my phone. Nahi
Mm-hmm.
dekhna hai, right? And like I don't mind ads in general, but
Mm-hmm.
just influencer ad content is horrible,
Okay.
right? And I really want people to give the influencers more levy, like let them play around, let them actually tell you their ideas,
Mm-hmm.
right? Don't tell them ki I want it this way only, and it probably doesn't match the way they talk.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
also, please stop giving 15, 20 USPs to each influencer for each product. The audience is not going to remember. 60 second mein nahi yaad rehta hai. Use the three simplest things that people can imagine, right? If I can imagine them, I will remember them.
Mm.
Keep it simple. Intrigue rakho.
Awesome. So I think on that note, if I had to sort of conclude in one line, our entire conversation is basically ad mat banao. Uh, and influencer co, give the influencers a lot more freedom to sort of explore and don't make ads. Anything else to add, Suji?
There's a lot to add. I think we should make like 2, 3 more episodes where we
Yeah.
can talk only
So
about content.
So I think for that, I think that's a good reason for you to sort of stay tuned and look forward to our upcoming episodes. And going forward, we'll try and be more regular. The thing is, as a team, we were traveling the last couple of weeks, and it becomes very difficult to record a podcast on the go. But anyway, so I think we'll try and be more regular. The target internally is to get to at least one episode a week. So we'll try and keep that up. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for sort of taking out uh, your time to sort of listen to us. Hope it added some value to what you are probably going to do with your marketing strategy. And like we said a lot of times, ad mat banao.
Please, no, no ads.
Awesome. Nice talking to you, Shuchi. Good to sort of have you on the show. And yeah, I think the audience will look forward to a lot more coming from us. Till then, stay
Yes,
tuned.
definitely.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.